Joe.
Well, and it's not just, it doesn't just pertain to race. I mean, Eddie, look, for instance, Joy Reid. Some things that Joy Reid wrote a decade ago.
Right.
And suddenly she was going to be cast off the island and she was going to be forever disgraced because she wrote those things, let's see, 5 years before Barack Obama decided that gay marriage was not a sin. I mean, he would listen. Joe Biden had to drag him to that point in 2012,
right?
And yet, now, if you think that if you don't want the federal government to be involved in bathrooms in North Carolina, and you don't want the federal government to be involved in birthday cakes in Indiana, then you are a homophobe and you hate all gay people. Listen, I hope you agree that we have a real problem with having honest debate, whether you're talking about race or sex or you name the issue. And too often, people on the left who are dominant in the media, who are dominant on college campuses, who are dominant on editorial pages, say they want a fair conversation, an honest conversation, an open conversation, but when you start having that conversation, suddenly you're called a racist or a misogynist or a homophobe.
Well, Joe, I think, I try to model every day of my life a commitment to civil exchange. I think oftentimes when we have these sorts of debates, it's very difficult to attribute good faith to your interlocutor, because you always think that there's some hidden assumptions driving the conclusions being drawn that are not being made explicit for fear of being called a racist or fear of being called a sexist or transphobic in a number of different ways. And so how do we smoke out those assumptions so that we can get at the general argument? I would love to have an argument I would love to have an argument, an honest argument, Joe, with a conservative without me assuming that they're racist. It would be wonderful.
Let me ask you, let me ask you a question. If a Hispanic man in Texas who belongs to the Catholic Church believes that marriage is only between a man and a woman, and that gay marriage is a sin, is he a homophobe?
Not necessarily. I mean, not necessarily. I mean, we would have to have a serious argument or conversation about how he acts on those beliefs. Right, how those beliefs animate the ways in which he interacts with others in his community.
Can we have that conversation on shows like this? Can we have an honest conversation on why women may be falling behind in math and science? That doesn't automatically assume that we're all misogynists.
Absolutely, Joe. But I was just sitting here thinking, I'm going to do a John Meacham. In 1828,
So I'm going to be bored, is what you're saying.
If you bring up Shays' Rebellion,
I was going to bring up David Walker's appeal in 1829. It was published in response to Jefferson's notes. And in Jefferson's notes, Jefferson is the first author in the U.S. to write a claim. He pursues the claim in the book of whether or not African-American inferiority was biologically based. Right? Most of the times it was kind of pursued by way of culture. He tried to make the claim that there was something in the anatomy of black people that that produced these differential outcomes. David Walker did not respond to the rational nature of that claim. Why would he respond to the claim? How could you respond to the claim that you're biologically inferior? Instead, rhetorically, he dismissed it for what it was. And so there are instances where folk are asking us to deal with certain sorts of claims about who you take yourself to be, about what your capacities are, that are simply anathema to who we take ourselves to be.
Well, of course.
And so it seems to me that there are certain conversations that we have to have where we don't concede that you can say certain things.
I absolutely agree.
That
is why people, and the article goes into this, but that is why this group, as it becomes more prominent, needs to police its borders and needs to keep people like Stefan Molyneux, who is a racist,
right,
and of the alt-right out of this. But I, you know, again, this article is not primarily about race. It's primarily about a group of people that are trying to have a good faith conversation.
Barry, you should have seen the response. I responded to a tweet by Ben Shapiro about needing to see the cameras of what happened before the arrest in Starbucks. And I said, I quoted James Baldwin, one of the more frustrating things about being black in this country is having to prove to white people that what's happening to you is real all the time. And the response of those hundreds of thousands and millions of people who follow these folks was absolutely horrific.
I believe that.
Horrific.
I believe that, but the response I'm getting to this article, and I'm not comparing them, but the response I'm already getting to this from the left is, I'm shameful. I mean, it happens
Look at this
on both
conversation.
sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is fun.
So Eddie, you're verified, I hope, by now. And if you're verified, please take the advice that I give to Mika at all times.
Stay
Don't go
verified.
into the sewer. Just look at your responses from verified, and your friends that are not verified. Your
No
life,
gutter.
you'll live a longer, healthier, and happier life. But Mika, on a serious note, this conversation we're having with Eddie and Barry and all of us is so critically important, because we all ask, why did Donald Trump win? Why did Donald Trump win? Why did Donald Trump win? Donald Trump won because we couldn't have honest conversations about race. We couldn't have honest conversations about the differences between men and women. We couldn't have honest conversations about gay marriage. We couldn't have honest conversations about how some people view the world differently without having these massive targets on your back. And listen, we can go on drawing our salaries, not talking about these things, not being castigated. I'm just telling you, this feeds into Donald Trump's strengths when this happens.
Absolutely.
We have to
not
talk
avoiding
and have
these subjects
honest
gives the fringe its power.
It does.
These are not dark subjects. These should be brought into the light.
Bari of Weiss, thank you so much. We'll be reading your piece.